weekend and they're ready to start another week here with us and in whatever organisation you're working within this morning. It's great to have Claire Lawton from Acorn Support. Claire, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Hope everybody else is as well.
I'm sure. Well, I hope they are. Yes, it's great that you're with us today, Claire, and also very, very timely with the recent changes and announcements to furlough. Claire, you're a regular contributor to our Lunch and Learns, and just it'd be great to have you back with us, talking a bit more about furlough and some of the employment challenges that many of our clients, I'm sure many of our listeners, are going to be facing over the coming weeks.
I'll do my best.
I'm sure, as we've talked before, the goalposts, undoubtedly changing from week to week. But we'll come on to that in a moment, and I'll introduce you again properly, Claire. But for those listeners who are with us the first time this lunchtime, it's great to have you with us, whether you're listening to us directly on the Zoom platform or whether you're on Facebook. And not too long ago, we started broadcasting these live on LinkedIn as well. So you may be on one of those three platforms. It's great to have you with us. Whichever platform you're listening to us this lunchtime, please do give us your questions, give us any questions. We'll try and give the answers, get that the right way around, and reach out to us, put anything in the comments box. If it's your first time with us, perhaps like and share this link. If it's your second time, perhaps give us a love and tell us why you come back. Tell us what it is you get out of these Lunch and Learns and how we can help you further and the sorts of topics you'd like to hear covered in the future. And as always, Claire will know, I love to know where you're listening to us from. Is it, are you in central Birmingham? Are you on the outskirts? Are you somewhere a bit more exotic? Are you working from home somewhere further afield? So do share where you're listening to us from. But Claire, just to introduce you more formally, it's great to have you with us. Your contact details are on the screen. Hopefully I've got those correct as usual. Claire, it's good to have you returning to us. It's been such a challenging time, hasn't it, Claire, over the last few months for every single business, whatever industry, whatever the product or service providing. We've all got behind us, our business staff, including ourselves, who help the business run from day to day, and ensuring we look after them should be, and I'm sure for all of us, is a primary focus.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly an interesting year, and the focus on how we're all doing and what we're all up to is really important, because quite often that can get a little bit neglected. Yes,
and it is such a challenging time, and I had a great guy from Coleshill Mortgages, Dan Sperber, a few last week, and we were talking about this slide again. I use it in many of my webinars, Claire. I think I've used it with you before. The change process, the transition process, and as people, we may have staff that have been on furlough, they've come off furlough, and in some organisations have gone back onto furlough again, depending on the industry in which you're working. And it's really unsettling, isn't it, Claire? A time of change and turbulence for many of our staff.
Yeah, it is such an unsettling time in all parts of our lives. I was talking to a colleague this morning and trying to describe how I kind of felt over the last weekend after the confirmation of the second lockdown, because I knew it was happening, kind of unsettled me a bit. And this week I decided that I was discombobulated.
That's a word I've not heard for a long time, Claire. Discombobulated.
I know, but it summed up how I was feeling sort of quite perfectly, really, because there's so much going on. There's so many things that are changing, and there's also so many expectations that we put on ourselves as much as we may feel we pick up from others. And this change cycle that we have here is really good for anybody and at any stage in life and with work, to really kind of understand where we're at and how we're feeling about things, so that we can then decide to adapt and change how we're going forwards.
Well, I'll let you into a secret, Claire. This is a slide that I've used in all of my webinars and workshops, but it came from something completely unrelated to Action Coach, in another walk of life. And I think it does apply. You're quite right. It applies to all of us in whatever situation, personal, business focused, family focused, when dealing with our children, our partners, our friends. We all go through this cycle of change and deal with it in a different way. And I'm sure there are still some people who are in disillusion from lockdown number one, never mind going into lockdown number two. And that roller coaster change takes people time to adjust.
Yeah, some people may still be in the ostrich syndrome of denial and have their heads in the sand from the first time around, whereas those that have managed to move through this may well be back on the cycle again and back into why me, who am I, what am I doing? But hopefully people have learned from this pattern that we all go through in these items of change to know how to progress through it much easier.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about planning for change last Thursday in our lunch and learn, and the point I was sort of taking away is not to be that complacent individual, you know, to plan for change, to think about, to try and think a few steps ahead and what, you know, what could happen, that what if question, you know, what if X happened, what if Y happened, and sort of try and have a, you know, sort of build some resilience and plan for change in our business, but also with our staff as well. But Claire, just thinking about where we are at the moment, and you know, the business owners we're hopefully listening to us at this lunchtime, either now or later on. You know, you and I first spoke during the beginning of lockdown number 1, didn't we? And talked about the furlough scheme and how people can manage change and manage their staff at that time. And I remember we looked at this slide, didn't we? You know, what to do as lockdown started back in March. Gosh, it seems a long time ago, doesn't it?
A long time, yet not very long at all.
No, it seems to whiz by in many ways, but when you say it's back in March, you know.
Yeah.
And at that time we were saying, you know, look after your staff. That was that first primary focus, you know, look after your staff and look at the finances that are available to you as you go into a difficult period within the business. And I guess in some ways that's a bit of a deja vu moment for some organizations, depending on the industry. I was talking only last week to friends and colleagues who are in the hospitality industry, in the retail sector. I went shopping myself a couple of weekends ago, and you know, some of the stories and conversations I was having with big and small retailers about the, you know, the challenges that are going to be imposed on them. But absolutely, we need to look after our staff, and there is government funding for both our staff for the furlough scheme and also for bounce back loans can be top, etc., etc. So, Claire, in a nutshell, if you can, you may not be able to put it into a nutshell, but what is different this time in terms of the furlough scheme to where we were, or the job retention scheme to where we were back in March last year?
I think some of the understanding of what we can be doing, as you may recall, or certainly from the HR side of things, the way in which the furlough was changing and the confirmation of the rules happened very, very quickly. And there was a bit Indeed, of information, then there was some more, then there was some more, then there was some more, and then there was a backtrack, and then there was some more. So from a professional perspective, we've been able to unravel a lot of that information and ensure that we're able to progress through it much easier. I think that from an employee's perspective, there's more of an expectation as to what's going to happen as well and how they may feel about it. Conversely, there is the, oh no, not me again. So back on to the other slide where there's that denial, that anger, that threat and fear may well be back in again. I did speak to an employee, which was with a mental health first aid call last week, and they'd gone through this cycle and were doing well, and then they were back on it again because of the announcement at the weekend, and they were feeling quite fearful for what was going to be happening. They kind of moved back up to that part. And in many ways, I think that the feeling that they were having was the expectation that we will just do it and none of the discussions. So none of the understanding and self-care for themselves or from their employer because it was expected, which was quite difficult for them to understand. But once we talked through it, actually there was then a much better position and the acceptance was there.
Which is great in many ways. It's I guess, Claire, for I always hear that phrase, I'm guessing, but I'm making the assumption from the conversations I've had, Claire, that lockdown this time does seem very different. Many organizations, as you have said, have learnt from the experience of the first time around. There are many organizations that have built in systems, resilience, mechanisms to be able to continue trading and operating to some degree. I mean, as I've said, I was saying only last week to several clients, depending on what industry you're in, it will either offer you opportunity or challenge, present a challenge. I've already mentioned the hospitality and the retail. They are the most obvious ones that are going to be impacted significantly by this lockdown. But for many other organisations who are perhaps stood back in lockdown number one and didn't, sort of put their staff on furlough, they've found ways and systems, partly because there's an absolute need to ensure that they survive and keep trading. But have found practical systems to enable them to keep moving and keep working going forwards. But and part of that is going to be, asking staff to work remotely, to work in a different way as we, enter this period, this next 4 weeks. Any thoughts on that, Claire, in terms of how people might be operating differently, what they need to be thinking about at this time as they're asking staff to work in a different way?
I think that reiterating what the communication strategy is going to be, the way in which to talk to people, to learn from what we've had previously, and to ensure that dialogue is maintained, because we can have the denial part, or we want to ensure that people aren't going into the depression or hostility, and that we bring them through the acceptance. And the real key way of that is to discuss what's happening with any of those individuals, to be mindful that we don't go, we did it last time, it's going to be fine this time, because assumptions make an ass of you and me, as the word denotes. So I think that, yes, we've got a lot of the mechanics in place, which are essential, and businesses have been able to shift quite quickly again, but it's what's happening to that individual, it's what's happening within that home life, if people are working from home, is going to be really key again to pick up and make sure we're having that dialogue.
Absolutely right. I've got a question here from Joe. Now, I don't know if Joe is a male or female, not that makes much difference, but hello, Joe. Good to have you with us. Joe's just asking about staff that have been made redundant recently at the end of the furlough scheme, as it was going to be, and then it was extended. What are the considerations in terms of rehiring or putting back onto the payroll? Do you have any experience or thoughts on that, Claire? I don't know if you've been involved in any situations like that.
We haven't with our clients, fortunately, at the moment. One key date to be sure of is that in order to be able to use the extension of the furlough scheme, an individual must have been on payroll and part of an RTI, so the real-time information, at midnight on the 30th of October. So they would have had to have been employed, there would have had to have been a payroll to include them. If they're not included in that, you cannot change anything and bring them back in onto the extended furlough scheme. What do we need to do? We need to look in the crystal ball and identify what can be happening for these individuals and their work going forwards. We have a difficulty as a business owner. We look to see how we're working with our employees, what the work is, what the government schemes are that we can be utilising to extend employment. But we have the obligation to look at this against the whole business structure. And if that really tough decision has been taken at the end of the furlough scheme to terminate the employment and that it wouldn't go forward into November, then it may still be that that is the sound decision. The only way, dependent upon this date and dependent upon what would have been agreed with an employee, would be that there's a mutual agreement to continue the employment and to withdraw the notice. But at this stage, what are we, the 9th, is it today? Yeah, the 9th.
It is, yes.
It's going to be too late for that, because there will also be the risk that if you backtrack, HMRC, when they do their investigations, may determine that you've backtracked without a genuine reason. So could have been a way around it, but take advice, take the support that's available, double check the nuances of your situation before you change anything. When we work with clients through any exit of an employee, and no matter what cause that there is. We also believe that it's really key to maintain that relationship with the individual, to ensure that they're aware of the reasons why their employment may have ended. And if it is because of what's happened with coronavirus, and you've been a good employer and they've been a great employee as well, that you can have that discussion about them resuming their employment at a later date. So, Joe, I'm really sorry, there's no magic answer to it. It's HR, we never do. Well, we do our best, but the complications that are there and the balance that we have to take for all elements of the business, coupled with the way in which the furlough scheme has worked, it may be too late.
And it's a great point you make there, Claire. I guess two things I've just taken from what you've been saying. One is it's about there's an opportunity, if it is a good employee relationship, to rehire in the future, which I think is a valuable point to make. I think the other thing is going back to what's on the screen is that that cycle of emotions, a process of transition, and individuals' mental health. And I think we've said about absolutely it's important to have really good communication with all of our staff, but I think it's also important to make sure we've got informed. We're being informed, and we've got the right information before we raise hopes and do talk to staff about rehiring, extension of furlough, etc., etc. As you quite rightly say, Claire, if a decision's been made in the past and it's a sound decision for the future benefit of the company, then it's it's a difficult one. But equally, you don't want to raise hopes that you can't then fulfil. It's individuals we're playing with at the end of not playing with, but individuals that are impacted. Absolutely. In every situation.
And we have to think about all individuals, all of the business. Whilst it's very personal to that colleague that we're having the conversation with, it is that bigger picture that we have to look to. And what organisations are doing at the moment is trying to predict far enough ahead with their crystal ball to see what's likely to happen. And some very tough decisions have had to have been taken.
And so the current job retention scheme, furlough scheme, as people know it, Claire, that's in place at the moment, are there any significant changes that we need to be aware of from the first time around?
So that key date, the 30th of October, you can now have somebody, if they were employed at that date, they can go on furlough now. They didn't have to have been on a previous period. So although this is an extension, it has a new key date that's in there. Still needs to be written down, still needs to have that written agreement, and you still must make notes and keep track of everything that you claim for. There have been some cases where an organisation has used the furlough payment to then pay the individuals. Absolutely crystal clear, you cannot use it as funding that payroll payment. You have to have paid the employees. You then wait for the money to come through, and then that comes back into the employer's account.
Right, okay.
So some were using it as a way of managing their cash flow with the grants that are paid. Really looking back to see what the calculations are as to somebody's usual hours. There's been some updates on that. The key thing is to keep track of your calculations and methodology. They've talked about investigations going on for 5 years. That was when we had the original tranche of furlough. My prediction, let's make it 7. You'll be safe then. It's set to be investigated. People will be looking to see how this is being used.
Yeah, absolutely. And the current furlough scheme, as Rishi Sunak was mentioning, is going on till March next year. Now, my thinking is, if you've had staff on furlough up until the end and you've perhaps extended that, or you've got staff on furlough going forwards, my view, and Claire, feel free to chip in and tell me what your thoughts are on this. That really, it's a time to think about, well, how is the business going to change and pivot? Because I think the current climate is going to carry on for quite some time. So what are we going to change in the business as owners to find the opportunities to be able to bring those staff back and help the business grow, survive and thrive and grow into the future? What are we going to do differently in terms of the business? What roles and responsibilities do we need going forwards?
Totally agree with that. So a couple of things there. There's been some talk, I think we talked about it on the last time that I was on, which was about the mental health balance between the people who've been working and those who've been on furlough and then come back into work, and just making sure that we have the care for those, everybody, because both situations have their pressures. Good old Facebooks and posts from some people who were delighted because they were then on furlough and were going to be able to do all their Christmas shopping. Not quite sure how, because of all the shops being locked down. But one of the things that you said there that's really important is we look at how the businesses are going to survive longer term, whether they pivot, how they adapt, how they look at what they're doing with their existing teams. I'm working on a really exciting project with a client at the moment who is looking at the team of senior leaders and saying, okay, where are we and where do we need to be to secure our future? Because the development and the investment in everybody within the business is key to know that we can be stepping forwards. You know, what are we doing? How are we pivoting? Where's our creativity strengths within the organisation? Where are the strengths in the planning and the delivery of any projects? Let's understand how this team works together and put everybody in the right position to take us forwards. Which is a real, once that mind changes, once that there is that shift, like you say, we pivot as a business, but we pivot in our minds as well to go, right, we're going to go great guns on this. What are we going to be doing? Because if we don't change, people will be left behind.
Absolutely. And the world is changing. You know, the world, the phrase that was often used in lockdown one was, you know, when things go back to normal. I think we all realize now that that is not going to happen. We're heading, you know, moving forward to a new way of working, a new norm going forwards. So how can we adapt our business, and, you know, how can we adapt the roles and the individuals? How do they need to adapt? Everybody, you know, every role in the organization, how does that need to adapt to ensure that business can operate and as I said, survive going forwards? I'm thinking for business owners right now, you know, we use this timeline in our previous conversations in lockdown one, Claire, but it is about thinking about the business long term, isn't it? You know, we talk a lot in Action Coach about having 90-day plans, which is absolutely brilliant and a must in any business, but also having that longer term thought. You know, where, you know, if I was to ask and speak to many of our clients, I say, well, where do you see the business in a year's time? If I was to call you back, Claire, onto one of these lunch and learns, where do you see Acorn Support in a year's time? You know, I'm not asking you to respond to me now, but it's a question we need to be asking ourselves. You know, where do we want to be in a year's time, and who do we need to be as business owners, and who do we need in the organisation to be there?
Absolutely, we do. And do you know, some of the best people to help answer that are the teams that we work with. Get your leadership team together, talk to them about what you can be doing. You know, the 5-year plan, the year plan, the 90-day plan are fundamental to the development and growth of any business and for an individual. But what we also need to be focusing on is what are we doing in the here and now? And the teams who are on the ground, they are the best people to help us work those things through. So open up our minds to what's possible. Understand how we have to be managing on a day-to-day basis, but do have that forethought as well.
I absolutely love that idea, Claire, because I think, you know, often it's a missed opportunity, but our staff, our colleagues, and when I say team, I mean team in the wider sense. You know, sometimes our clients, our suppliers can help highlight how we can do things differently, can also help highlight some of the challenges we may face in where we need to take the business, and I say need, not want, and also, you know, help come up with some of the solutions as a team to get the business where we need to be. And also, when I'm planning with my clients on 90-day and longer, I say to them, what skills do they need as a business owner? Or what skills in the business do you have? and what skills perhaps might you need to go and acquire, whether that's outsourcing or skilling up your staff or yourself. It's really important to use this time in with some urgency, I would suggest, to think about where's the business going and what do you need to do differently in the business going forwards.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with you. So important. And often so doing some of this work on this project that I've talked about, so prior to this most recent one, is that we often discover that we've got latent skills that are there that we've not had to use for some time, or we've not been able to practice. And that may be because we've got somebody in that team who is more skilled in that area. If we think about completing projects, I'm not a completer. I'm there on the creative, I'm there to get things going, but then if something shiny comes along, that might be me. But I've got my colleague Lynn, who is the completer. She makes sure that everything is in place and puts that there. Doesn't mean to say I can't do it, but I haven't had to for a while. And actually, I prefer those other areas which are more akin to what I like, and versus what Lynn can do. But those skills are often there within people. So if we stop and look at where we are as individuals, where you are as a team and how they fit together, you can see where there are gaps and enable those skills, those traits, those behaviours to adapt and develop.
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. It's an opportunity just to reflect on what skills, what opportunities there are in the business. What skills do you have? And I think in my own career, Claire, in my middle age and stage of life, what's middle age these days? But anyway, having had a number of different roles in the past, what skills have I perhaps used that I'm not using now that perhaps I could brush up on, go back and just bring up to speed and up to the right standard. I'm sure many of us have got staff and colleagues in our organizations that perhaps we've got skills we're not tapping into, and could we use those and do a bit of a skills audit, at this time?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for those organizations, there are many, as I said earlier on in this webinar, that have learned from lockdown 1 and have put systems and processes in place, but there may be things that perhaps still need to be reviewed, even if they think they've done them before, such as working from home, making sure that if you've got staff who've been into the office and now gone back to working from home, have got the right resources, you've done that sort of health and safety check. What sort of things should employers be looking for, Claire, in terms of if they've got staff that are working remotely for these 4 weeks of lockdown?
Go back to doing that risk assessment. Absolutely, you need to, even if it was in place before, you've had a period of 6 months plus that's gone on. So get individuals to do that risk assessment again and to talk them through how they do that. We are aware that there are people sitting on sofas, hopefully less than the work, because I've talked about that quite a bit. But in that period of time, things can change within a home. Go back, address it, work out how it's going to work well for them and the business. Talk about the way in which the work day pattern is going to work best for them, because being at home has different distractions. I was on a call earlier and there was an individual who works up in the loft because that's the best place for them to work. And when they're on meetings, so if they were doing this now, they'd actually lift the loft ladders up so that nobody could disturb them. So
I love it.
I love that idea. But it's identifying those ways and talking through with the employees and your team as to what they need. Some people, that would stress the bejeebers out of them. It would with me. But actually with other people, it works. So there's no idea that's a silly idea, other than no ideas at all, because there are options around it.
Yes.
One of the things that I think is really, really important at the moment, for now, as we're in this stage, is to look back over what we have done since March, to identify what has worked really well and celebrate those successes, because that will enable us to look to see what works well for people going forwards as we're into this second phase or second stage of lockdown. because that can actually help people ground in what works well for them in that environment. My team, I personally am coming back into the office because I've got all my stuff here now. My mental health is better when I'm here, because otherwise I'm just in home. And one of my team needs to balance on that for herself. So she's going to spend 4 days working from home, and she'll have a day coming in the office. We've got all the protection in place, and that works well, and it provides that right balance. And that was something that we realised was going successful before.
Yeah. I think it's a really important point you make there, Claire, and is to make sure we learn from the first time round, but also not to assume that everyone has got the same home working environment that they had in lockdown the first time. One person may well have been living with their parents, they're now living on their own or living with somebody else, or moved to different parts of the country. So I think it's a really important point you make there, that not to go, not to assume we use the same risk assessment, but to actually, it's been 6 months, put the time and effort in and make sure that you look after your staff and make sure you've done that risk assessment for every single member of staff who's working remotely.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I had another question, another thought there, but it's just gone out of my head. It will come back to me in a moment, Claire. In terms of maintaining performance for staff as they're working remotely, what are your thoughts on that?
Get the whip to crack with them, because that works really well. No. The way in which we work is different for each individual. So that conversation to understand what the drivers are for each person are really good. To understand and be clear on what the outcomes of work are. Quite often people are focused on, when do you book in, when do you book out, how many toilet breaks you might have, what are you doing, checking in, checking out, all of that. Well, that's only checking on the attendance. Attendance is really important, but actually the quality of the output is what we're really focused on. How are you delivering the service that you have in the environment that you're now in? And we talk about the output quite often when we're looking at performance management, because we work in different ways, and particularly if the environment has less of a structure around it, because the postman comes, there might be deliveries that are coming, there's a delivery for next door that they're not in but you are, the cat wants letting out, all of those things impact on our days, yet the output can still be consistent, if not higher. So talk to your team, work out what's needed. Ask them what they need from you to be able to deliver the excellence within their role.
Yes, and I think, as you've said before, Claire, on many of these Lunch and Learn webinars, and we do it here in Action Coach, it's about regular communication, isn't it? Touching base with your staff, not just first thing in the morning to crack the whip, but having those nice conversations as well as the more challenging conversations throughout the day, throughout the week, so you don't leave people sort of high and dry throughout the week and then catch them on a Friday. Well, what have you done all week? Have that consistent and good quality communication. We've got another Claire listening to us. Hi, Claire. It's good to have you with us. So from one Claire to another, she's made the point, which is what I was going to ask earlier on, Claire, which is about the big difference this time in lockdown is that the schools are open.
Yes.
And so how can employers, what should employers be doing in terms of giving that allowance to adapt and ensure that, their employees can get their kids to and from school? Should allowances be made? Is it something that should be expected anyway? They should have systems in place. What are your thoughts on it, Claire?
Should, could, would you? What were they doing before? There's no prescriptive answer other than what's in the contract of employment. But if, go back, we talk about developing first-class employers and developing first-class employees. Have that conversation, because yes, children, dependent upon their age and their abilities, need to get to school and need to get back. From an employee's perspective, Don't assume that your employer will be totally flexible and let you do the school run and wander back and not worry about what time you get on to doing your work, because that has to be there. There has to be some dialogue. But really identify, what does the job need? What does the employer need? What do the children need? And how can you manage that within your framework around all of those key people, and have that discussion. We have had situations prior to lockdown, but also particularly this time as well as before, where it's left to one of the parents to do all the school runs. And when, you know, we've kind of had that difficulty, well, how's that going to work? Because I can't do both, because my employer is needing me to be in work. And actually, for me as an individual, I need to be doing that, because otherwise I'm feeling as if I'm guilty or fearful of what the consequence may be. Well, a couple of people that we've spoken to have gone, actually, we can do it. We can share it. So how do we share it? How do we make it successful? And they might split the morning and the afternoon, or they might do 1 week on, 1 week off, whatever happens. But again, it's back to that conversation. But does an employer have to allow somebody to do the school run? Not if it's in their contract. Should they or could they? Yes, if they have that conversation and be open and honest about it.
It reminds me, Claire, of a phrase I used to use when I managed larger teams years ago, and it was always give a little, get a lot. You know, I think that goes from both sides, you know, from the employer and the employee. And it's that, I think, what you're alluding to there. No, we don't have to do anything in terms of, you know, give unless it's in the contract, but absolutely, you know, by both sides looking at how they can work together, and, you know, sort of compromise and find the solution that works for both the employer and the employee. The employer, I'm sure, will get a lot more out of the employee, and the employer will get a lot more job satisfaction and feel a lot more loyal to the employer going forward. So it's finding that solution that fits everyone, isn't it? And I think having some understanding, compassion from both sides at the moment is, you know, as we face these challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And dare I say, Claire, anything about policies and procedures? But if a business hasn't by now updated their policies and procedures, what are you going to tell them, Claire?
Might be wise to do it. What's your fear of not doing it? The policies, procedures, contracts, handbooks, all of that stuff that we have allows there to be the balance between what the legislation has and the way in which we engage as an employer. And it sets that understanding of what the employment relationship is going to be like. Some quite radical thinking is that we get rid of the lot, we treat people like adults, and we all work well together. However, we do need to have some parameters which enable us to actively work in the businesses that we're in. So have those in place, understand what they are for the way in which the business is now. Talk to your employees about it so they understand what the give and take is, give a little, gain a lot. And ultimately work together as adults. And then you can work out what you need to be doing. But if you've got a policy, you need to be adhering to it. But if it hasn't been reviewed for quite some time, spend this time now ensuring that those building blocks are in place so that the relationship can develop on from there.
Brilliant. Great advice. Yes, I think it's, you know, if there is something holding you back, if it is that frog you've not eaten by now, then maybe it is time to seek some external support, you know, to find, you know, to contact somebody like yourself, Claire, somebody who's got advice and sort of experience and can give some guidance in looking at those policies, because it is really important that they are reviewed and updated, you know, as soon as possible. The other, I remember when lockdown one was well coming to an end, it sort of, you know, sort of depending on what industry. I remember the time we could buy a car and I think it was a car and a coconut, I said at one time, because you could go to the markets and the car showrooms and nothing else. But it is much harder to reopen a business than it is to you know, to close it down or to put people on furlough. And Claire, what are your thoughts? I know my view is that start planning now in terms of what you might need to do to bring people back and what your business might look like, in 3-4 months time. But we're also heading towards, dare I say, that Christmas period, aren't we, where traditionally it's a good time to give all your staff morale boost and get everyone go out together and enjoy time together. But I guess it's thinking about now, start thinking now, don't wait until the announcement on lockdown, when it's going to come to an end. But we know now the plan is that it's going to come to an end at the beginning of December. Start planning now on how you're going to bring people back and what you're going to do with them, rather than waiting for another 3 weeks and then deciding and starting to think about that thought process. And so it's a two-part question, really, Claire. Is that, what can we be doing now to think about that process? And secondly, what are your thoughts about sort of Christmas gatherings, and not from a COVID point of view, we have to adhere to the guidance, but in terms of staff morale and sort of the impact on from an HR perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Discombobulated. That's why I felt discombobulated. Just the way that I'm feeling about it all at the moment. So yeah, there's those different views and different ways that we have with all of this. Plan for it, understand what worked well last time, what you can put in place this time. Speak to your employees. It's communication again, isn't it? About how
so important, absolutely.
Bring people back out of lockdown. Will we be opened up again in early December?
Really good question.
Or will we have a little bit longer? But start and think now and talk about, well, what can we be doing? How can we be balancing on consistent balance and fun for the complete and grow part on phase 5 there? Be consistent about the communication with everybody. Balance between the requirements of the business, the requirements of an individual, the requirements of COVID, and the requirements of our mental health, and think about the way in which we can do things differently. There will be ways of managing things. There will be ways of still having that fun. A lot of businesses would do the Secret Santa, across the team. Well, we can't do that now because we're not going to be together and we can't be together. We can. Absolutely. We can. It can still be done. We just have to think a little bit laterally, a little bit differently about what we do with it. No magic answers. It may be that we consider having a virtual get together. So would normally go for a curry, for example. So everybody who would like to participate, save that day in the diary free. Let's all meet from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock, order in your curry, and we will all sit on Zoom, munching away at the curries, go into the breakout room so you can still get everybody together, and you can still have that sense of community that you would have, but managing it in a slightly different way.
I've heard some lovely examples already, Claire, of people planning such things, a virtual cheese and wine, where an employer is going to send everybody a cheese and wine pack out, and they're all going to sit on Zoom and do their cheese and wine. I've heard about virtual Secret Santas, or not so Secret Santas, but virtual presents being sent around via Amazon and other providers. So there are ways in which we can really support and give our staff that is, sort of morale boost that they need at this time of year. Not wanting to move too far away from keeping staff happy, but Paul has just asked a question about putting staff onto remote working on a permanent basis, Claire, as a solution. What are your thoughts about that in terms of contractual obligations, etc., if you want to make permanent changes now?
Consult. Sorry, it's communication again. If there's going to be a permanent change to somebody's contract of employment, dependent upon what the clauses are, you may need to go into consultation with them. Planning, again, it's a regular theme, but your focus is on the different elements of the business. My team, just as an example, so we provide that HR support to our clients. We all work exceptionally well. We've all got the dedication to know what we need to be doing and delivering for the clients. The challenges for us are that shared information, that shared quick chat about something, or you might overhear a phone call that you need to drop some extra information in on. That wouldn't work necessarily for us on the long-term basis, but other companies it would work extremely well with. Other companies can think about changing their business structure so that you have smaller hubs that people can go into, rather than 100 people all living and working under the same roof. Dependent upon what's in the contract will depend on how that planning and consultation needs to go. But identify what the pros and cons are of it and work around them. It can work exceptionally well, and it can be a dog's dinner. So, yeah, now is the time to think about what we can be doing, Paul. Bit difficult to answer it in any more detail, and I hate giving really fluffy responses, but without knowing what the business is, knowing what's going on there, it is a little difficult to guide. Plan it, think about it, both sides of the coin, pros and cons, and also why not? Could be
Absolutely,
done.
and I've just put your contact details there on the screen, Claire. I think it's important people know how to get hold of you. Paul, if you want to pick up that conversation, my thoughts as you were talking there, Claire, is there can be some really positive messaging to go through that. It's about long-term sustainability of the business, about certainty for individuals, and savings, I guess, for the business if you don't need large premises. But on the other side of the coin, as you've just mentioned, the amount of information we do subconsciously absorb from each other. When working as part of a team in a close-knit environment. And also you may well have staff that want to work in that environment and might not necessarily want to be in a permanent change situation. So there's two sides, and it's about making sure you think and have informed conversations with your staff and make informed decisions at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people, work is a sanctuary. For some people, work is where they want to be going to move away from some of the pressures from home. I remember when my kids were younger, it was the only place that I got a hot cup of tea. So don't assume that one answer fits all.
Absolutely. I guess that I'm using that phrase and guessing, but I would suggest, Claire, as I'm sure you would, that having individual conversations to see what the needs of your individual members of staff are, and doing different roles. Working from home permanently for one role may work very well, might be more challenging for another. So, Paul, a good question to be thinking through, and I think the good thing is, Paul, that you're thinking about it now, and you're having that thought in your own mind. And I would absolutely suggest picking up the phone. Claire's number's behind there, or dropping her an email, and so having that more in-depth conversation about the impact on staff. And I'd also love to have a conversation with you, Paul, about planning for your business. It sounds like you've got some thoughts about where it might be in 2021 and where you want to be as a business owner. So it'd be good to have a conversation with you as well. But it's great that you are thinking that far ahead. Now, that is what we all need to do, Claire, isn't it? We need to be planning and thinking, where is our business going to be in 2021, and what do we need to do to get it there? And first and foremost, thinking about our staff as part of that process.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I'm conscious we've got about 10 minutes before we need to wrap up, Claire. But in terms of where we are as businesses at the moment, where the economy, the pandemic, Claire, I know you haven't got a crystal ball there, but is there anything, any top tips that really you think, actually, if I was talking to a potential client or an existing client right now, these are the three things I'd be suggesting they go away and review, put in place, update, consider from an HR perspective right now?
The working from home, do the risk assessments, have that dialogue with employees, planning what we do for the future, assess what you've been wonderful at before, see if you can identify why, and work on those things, work on improving what we can do the best. And really just support each other in the business communities that we're in, but also with our employees. The issues that we have faced over this year have been untold in my lifetime and that of many others. We've just had Remembrance Sunday. as a nation, we've been through an awful lot, and this is the most prevalent change that we've had in so many of our lifetimes. But it doesn't mean to say we can't keep going with it. But be there and support each other. Have that compassion for everybody that's around you. Give a little, gain a lot, and that's hopefully as a motto that I've embodied throughout my career anyway, is to be there and support and have that guidance, and you will not look back.
Absolutely. Thank you, Claire. And it's interesting you use the same phrase I've used for many years myself as well. You give a little, get a lot, in terms of managing your staff and managing yourself. Give a little of yourself and you'll get much more back. And I was also sorry, Claire, go on.
I do wish I remembered that you always ask me that question, and I always forget to prepare for it. Remind me next time. Sorry.
But I was also reflecting at the weekend, Claire. So many that have gone before us have given so much, so that we can enjoy what we have today. And I was just reflecting with my children, over the weekend about, we all have, well, many of us, most of us have, sort of homes, warm homes with Wi-Fi and IT, and we have the luxury to be able to go and work in a remote way. So we have an awful lot to be grateful for. And I think my other thought is that, as we're reflecting over the weekend and learning the lessons of history, and how that's got us to where we are, also the importance, as we are right now, learning from what's even gone on earlier in this year. Learn from lockdown number one, learn from what went well, learn from what challenges you faced, and if you've lost customers and clients or members of staff, ask yourself why. What was it? Was it anything you did? Was it more about what they wanted from the business? But just take that time to reflect and look back as you continue to plan and look forward. I think it is really, really important. So a poignant weekend and some poignant messages, I think, for all of us as we face this lockdown for the next few weeks. And also my other point just to highlight is to remember that we are in the news this morning. Wales is just coming out of a more severe lockdown, and we just need to bear that in mind. If you're operating nationwide as a business, that each part of the UK is under different restrictions, and to bear that in mind, and how your staff, if you've got staff remotely working in different areas, to consider your policies and procedures and how they would impact on staff in different areas of the country. But Claire, I've put your details up on the screen. I always give you this opportunity. I want to make sure I do it today. Just if anybody does want to contact you, what sort of services do you offer, and what does that first conversation look like, Claire?
First conversation really depends on what the needs are of the person calling. We, as a team, and I have been in the business. Well, I'm a career HR person with sort of 31 years of experience, and we've run Acorn for 11 years. There aren't many situations that we have not experienced, but we understand how issues, concerns, even areas of development can have some underlying concerns as to why should we change, but we understand those and we know how it can feel. We start with policies, procedures, but it's so much more than that. That's just the building blocks. But if anybody has got a niggle, a concern, a point of pain, don't sit on it. Don't take a paracetamol or stick a sticking plaster on. Face it, address it, get the support, get the guidance, get the help. And if we can be part of that help, we'd be delighted to hear from you. But the most important thing is to recognise it and do something about it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. And I can say that we've known each other and worked together for a long time now. You've been a client of Action Coach yourself, and absolutely recommend Claire and her services. So if you've got any HR queries or concerns, Claire, in my view, should be your first port of call, and she'll give you honest, sound advice. If she can help, she will. And if she thinks actually this is for somebody else, you'll give honest, clear advice, Claire, every single time. And that's why we love having you here as part of the Action Coach, as part of our wider team here today, Claire. So thank you for giving up your time.
Thank you.
Just before we go, I just want to share with our listeners 30X. I mention it most of my webinars, but I'm not going to shy away from it today. So if you are thinking, well, how can I drive my business forwards? Money is tight, but actually I want to do something to make sure I develop myself and develop the business going forwards. Well, our founder, Brad Sugars, has put 30 years of his business experience into 30 videos that you can watch 30 minutes a day for 30 days. So that's 15 hours of training for just £25 plus VAT. So £30 a week to sign up. And not only that, do you get that, you not only do you get the 30 videos, you also get a weekly drop-in session to go through and question and challenge yourself and to talk to others in a like-minded group on aspects of your business. And if that's not enough, we also give you a 90-day planning session chucked in as well. So you got an opportunity to plan your business over the Christmas period and into the new year. So you're in the right place in 2021 to use that next year to really ensure your business doesn't just survive, but thrives, and you are absolutely successful in your industry. So if you're interested in that, and to top that off, there is a money back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied with taking part, you don't feel you've got value for money out of it, we'll give you every penny back. So I can't say fairer than that. There's a no risk trial to come and find out a bit more about coaching and a bit more about how, more importantly, you can grow your business going forwards. So if you'd like to find out anything about that, or you want to have a conversation with Claire on HR, any HR concerns or queries, we'd both love to hear from you. Our contact details will be in the drop down box below the video. We're going to put this video, it's live on YouTube and LinkedIn, but you can find us both on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Do connect with us, do come and say hi. We'd love to have that conversation. And thank you again, Claire. I'm rambling on a bit now, but thank you so much for being with us this lunchtime. I really appreciate your taking your time out.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I love being on here. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. Well, I'll let you go. We'll go and grab a sandwich quickly and look forward to seeing you, Claire, in a few weeks' time for an update on where we are with lockdown and all things HR, and look forward to seeing our visitors or hearing from our visitors and our listeners on Thursday for our next Lunch and Learn this Thursday. But for now, take care, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.